All right, sweetheart, humor us. What's your call sign? Sunshine? Princess? Spreadsheet 6? Let's hear it before lunch. The senior officer's mess at Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point ran the length of a flight planning room and smelled of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. 12 tables, 46 chairs, fluorescent panels overhead, one of them cycling through a slow, unaddressed flicker on the east wall that had been logged in the maintenance request system for 11 days and not addressed. The room held the particular midday noise of officers eating in institutional proximity. Tray on table sounds, the low scrape of chairs, fragmented conversations that nobody was fully committed to finishing. Outside, the regular percussion of FA-18s taxiing on the flight line ran beneath all of it, like a bass note that the people inside had long since stopped hearing. Captain Garrison Thorpe stood between the second and third tables with a ceramic mug in his right hand and a grin he had built specifically for this room, for this moment. For this audience of 9 Marine officers who had been eating their lunches and not quite having enough to talk about until now. He was 33 years old and had been a fixed-wing logistics officer at this installation for 14 months, long enough to understand which rooms he owned. The senior officer's mess was one of them. He had timed this, the number of officers present, the lull in the lunch hour, the particular early afternoon light that put the center table under direct illumination. He was good at these calculations. He had given them something to talk about. The target was at the center table. Navy blazer, white shirt, no jewelry, hair pinned with the functional economy of someone for whom hair was a variable to be managed and not a presentation to be made. A Rampart Performance Group consultant binder open beside her government-issue tray, assessment matrices, unit wellness indices, the paper architecture of a behavioral health evaluation she had been conducting for 10 days. She had a fork in her right hand and she was chewing, and she did not look up when Thorpe's voice crossed the room. She finished chewing. She set the fork at the 6 o'clock position on the rim of her plate, exactly where she had set it for 9 consecutive meals, at the precise midpoint of the plate's lower arc, and she picked up her water glass. One measured sip. Glass returned to the same 3-inch square of placemat it had occupied for the length of the meal. Then she looked at Captain Garrison Thorpe for the first time, and the expression on her face was the expression of a woman who had just been told the weather and found it entirely unsurprising. She said nothing. The room waited. The junior captain at the far table had already let out a low laugh. The first lieutenant near the window was checking his phone. The lieutenant colonel with the tablet, the senior officer present, the one who could have said something, looked up once, made a calculation, and looked back down at his screen. Thorpe raised his mug in a mock toast, satisfied. He had accomplished what he had come to accomplish. He had reminded the room that she was a civilian, that civilian women in Marine Corps senior officer messes were a curiosity at best and a nuisance requiring management at worst. That no one at any of these tables was going to defend her, because there was nothing to defend. She was a contractor. She was temporary. She was nobody. He turned back toward the serving line. In the far corner, at a table where his tray had sat untouched for the last 90 seconds, Master Gunnery Sergeant Brennan Holloway did not watch Thorpe walk away. He was watching her. More specifically, he was watching what she had done with her eyes in the half-second before she turned her attention to the captain. It was a sweep, clean, unhurried, efficient. Door to the left, window behind her, door to the right. No hesitation between points. No conscious-looking pause at any of them. Threat priority order. The way operators run it when running it has become involuntary. The way breathing is involuntary. The way someone raised in a certain profession never entirely stops doing it, even when they are sitting in a government cafeteria, eating institutional food and pretending to be someone they are not. Holloway set down his fork. His jaw shifted slightly. He did not speak. She was already writing in the binder. The Rampart Performance Group assessment forms were on top, stress evaluation matrices, unit wellness indices, the visible document layer. Beneath them, inserted between the second and third dividers, was a second page, smaller. No headers. 4 columns of handwritten notation in the compressed fieldwork shorthand of someone who had spent years writing in the field with limited time and limited light. Names, times, table positions, behavioral observations. She had been logging this room since day one. She turned to a fresh row. In the leftmost column she wrote a single letter, T, then a timestamp, then nothing more. She turned the page back over and returned to the assessment matrix. Across the room, Holloway rose from the corner table slowly, with the deliberate economy of a large man who had learned not to move quickly unless it was time to move quickly. He walked toward the exit. He did not look at Thorpe. He did not look at her. He looked at the door she had scanned first, the loading bay door on the south wall, held there for a count of 2, then the window at the north end, then the main mess entrance. He had run that same sequence in his head, cataloging which exits a trained person would prioritize in which order, and her sequence and his sequence matched exactly. Then he was through the main mess entrance himself, and he was gone. No one in the room noticed him leave. She did. She noted it in a way that required no notation grid, no written entry, no documentation. She filed it the way she filed everything, efficiently and without ceremony, and returned to the assessment matrix in front of her. The loading bay door on the south wall, the door she had scanned first, banged open 112 seconds later. Lance Corporal Dario Metz, 21 years old, staggered in holding his left hand against his chest. The blood had already soaked through the cuff of his utility blouse and was beginning to work down the sleeve. A cable tie edge on the flight line loading dock had caught him at the base of the palm and opened something that was pumping steadily and would not stop on its own. He was pale. He was beginning to drift at the edges. 2 officers at the nearest table stood reflexively and then stood there, because neither was a corpsman and neither had a clear idea of what came next. Hospital Corpsman 3rd Class Priya Vasquez, 24, was crossing the room at a jog from the far station, her medbag swinging. She was good. She was going to reach him, but she was still 15 feet away. Caldwell spoke. She did not stand. Her voice did not rise above the level required to travel 22 feet in a room with ambient noise. It was a voice calibrated for loud environments, for chaos, for giving instruction to people whose hands needed to be moving before their brains had finished processing the words. 2 finger widths proximal. Radial check. Write the time on his forearm. Go. Vasquez was trained. That was the thing about MARSOC trauma cadence. Trained people recognized it, and their hands moved before the rest of them caught up. Tourniquet seated correctly. 2 finger widths proximal to the laceration. Radial pulse checked at the wrist. Time of application written on the forearm in black permanent marker, because time of tourniquet application is a number that will save or end a life in the care that comes after. 112 seconds from the moment Metz came through the door to controlled hemorrhage. The mess was very quiet for a moment. Thorpe broke it. His smirk had not left his face, but it had lost its footing, still present, but only because he hadn't yet told it to leave. He said, loudly enough for the room to register. Impressive. They teach that at the Behavioral Health Convention? 3 officers laughed. 2 did not. The north door opened. A sergeant entered with a message clipboard. Nothing unusual, routine foot traffic. Every head in the room stayed where it was. Caldwell's eyes moved. Door, window, door. The same sweep, the same sequence, the same speed. Under 1 second, complete. And Holloway, who had not left but was standing just inside the main entrance doorway with his cover in his hand, watched it happen again. He had now observed it 4 times in 11 minutes, across 2 separate door-opening events and 1 window glare shift. He knew exactly 1 population of human beings whose eyes ran that pattern without apparent conscious instruction. He leaned his back against the exterior wall of the mess building and took out his personal cell phone. Not his duty phone. He scrolled through the contacts to a listing that read only RB. He did not dial immediately. He looked at the number. He had looked at this number 3 times before, twice during a joint task force deployment in 2018, and once from a parking lot outside a NCIS field office in 2021, both times when something he was looking at did not match what he was being told it was. He had always been right. He looked back through the rectangle of the mess window at the room inside, at the table where she had already returned to the assessment forms. Then he dialed. It rang twice. A voice answered. Holloway said 4 words. I need a name. He listened. His expression did not change. He did not look back through the window. He looked at the ground. Then he looked up at the sky, the way a man looks when he has already known the answer for some time and is only now deciding what to do about it. Thorpe was not a man who accepted the draw. Over the 4 days that followed, working with the patience and institutional familiarity of someone who had navigated this specific kind of terrain before, he ran a low-grade harassment campaign calibrated to remain technically beneath the threshold of any formal complaint process, the kind of sustained pressure specifically designed to make a civilian contractor quietly request reassignment and disappear without generating paperwork or questions. He had done this before. He was practiced. He understood how the bureaucratic immune system of a Marine air station could be made to work against a target rather than for one, how a flag here and a memo there and a nickname seated in the right thread could reshape the social temperature of an installation until the environment resolved the problem for him. It had always worked. The civilian contractors who rotated through Cherry Point wanted their assessments filed and their contracts completed and their return flights booked. They were not, as a category, people who wanted to become problems. They wanted to finish and leave. It made them manageable. What he had never done was run it against someone who was logging every instance in a fieldwork notation grid and cross-referencing each entry against a parts diversion audit she was simultaneously building from inside the same binder. Day 11, evening. Screenshots appeared in the junior officer's group text. Thorpe had seeded a thread with a nickname, Spreadsheet Six. 17 messages assembled in under an hour. A meme built from her Rampart Performance Group contractor badge photo. At the edge of the thread, having said nothing, First Lieutenant Aaron Briggs, 27 Supply Officer, quietly screenshotted the entire conversation. He did not send it anywhere. He set his phone face down on the desk and looked at the ceiling. Day 12, 07:30 hours. A hand-lettered sign had been taped to the back of the chair at her usual table. Reserved. Behavioral Health. Civilian. Large block letters. Dark marker. Fully legible from the serving line. She walked in, read it, sat down in the chair, and opened the binder. 2 officers at a nearby table watched to see what she would do. She began writing. She did not remove the sign. She photographed it with her phone. Casual, quick, the way someone photographs a restaurant menu, and turned back to the binder. Day 12, 1100 hours. Her contractor access badge triggered a secondary review flag at the vehicle checkpoint, a rescreen request requiring 40 minutes minimum, enough to eliminate her entire afternoon appointment window. Gate Sergeant Staff Sergeant Lena Forrest, 30 years old, ran the badge check 3 times and found nothing wrong. The flag had no originating officer name attached, no routing identifier, no chain. Caldwell waited without speaking. When she was cleared, she asked Forrest to note the time on the gate log, and she photographed the board. Day 13, evening. She was in the BOQ room. Government furniture. 1 window facing the flight line. The Rampart binder open on the desk. Assessment forms on top. Beside it, the second notebook. Black cover, no label. Its notation grid now holding 15 entries. She photographed the open page with the matte black device that was not her contractor-issue phone. Smaller, no visible brand markings. Before doing so, sweeping the window and the door in sequence. Her posture during the sweep was the posture of someone for whom checking exits before conducting sensitive work had long since ceased to be a decision and had become simply what one does, as automatic as testing the lock. Day 14, 1200 hours. The mess. Thorpe stopped at her table on his way to the serving line. He leaned in. His voice was low and specific, calibrated for her ears only, with a tone that had been carefully constructed to sound like professional concern. You should think about requesting a transfer. Civilian contractors don't always do well in the long posting. She looked up at him. Her eyes moved to the door behind his left shoulder, then to the door behind his right, then back to him. She wrote something in the binder. He straightened and walked away. By day 13, she had documented 14 incidents, taken 3 photographs and 1 gate log image, and generated 1 short-format video clip from the hairpin camera clipped to her blazer lapel since day 3. She had worn it continuously, because she had learned in a career defined by patience that the action worth documenting is always the one you did not know was coming until it arrived. She was not angry about any of it. Anger was a resource, and she had learned to spend her resources as she spent everything else, carefully, accountably, without waste. She closed the notebook, smoothed the cover flat with the heel of her hand, looked up. Her expression was the same expression it had been for 14 days. The sign was still on the back of her chair. If watching her absorb all of that in silence made your jaw clench, hit subscribe. You're going to want to be in the room when the door closes on him. On the morning of day 14, a memorandum routed through the office of the base. Sergeant Major without a covering note, without a routing identifier, and without a signature block. A fraternization flag, unsigned at the bottom, alleging an after-hours interaction between the Rampart Performance Group consultant and an unspecified junior enlisted Marine in the BOQ during the previous week's assessment period, false on every particular. Also, from a bureaucratic standpoint, precisely plausible enough, specific in allegation, vague in detail, formally submitted through the correct channel to trigger a mandatory administrative review. A review that would freeze her base access clearance, that would lock her out of the restricted records reading room where her Phase 2 audit documentation was housed. Thorpe had graduated from social pressure to procedure. He believed this was his cleanest move yet. Sergeant Major Roland Kessler, 52, 28 years in the Marine Corps, read the memorandum twice and set it down. Something was wrong with it. The language was too smooth for something composed in genuine complaint, too precise in its procedural framing, too vague in its human particulars. And it had arrived without a name on it, which was not how clean memos arrived in his office. He initiated the review because regulation required it. He also began logging the routing metadata, quietly, because a sergeant major's job is to notice when something doesn't smell right. Records reading room, 1000 hours. Caldwell arrived for her morning audit session. Her badge flagged at the reader. Corporal Marcus Webb, 23, duty clerk, ran it twice and avoided making direct eye contact. She did not raise her voice. She did not demand to speak with anyone above Webb's grade. Log the time of the flag and give me the routing reference number. Webb wrote both down on a message slip and handed it across the counter. She photographed the message slip before she turned to leave, sweeping the door and the window in the half-second before she raised the device. Then she walked to the corridor outside, placed a call on her personal device, 11 seconds in duration, said nothing the building could hear, ended the call, checked both corridor exits, and walked back to the BOQ. Posture unchanged. Stride length unchanged. 32 seconds door to door. 1300 hours. The mess. Major Terrence Aiken, 41, Malls, 1-4 logistics officer, dropped into the seat across from her without announcing himself. He had a resupply chain problem he couldn't resolve, an air component bottleneck somewhere in the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing's support architecture that was eating days off his maintenance cycle. He framed it in civilian logistics language, the kind of general supply chain terminology that a behavioral health consultant might or might not be expected to follow. She answered without looking up from the binder. Your 3043 bottleneck is downstream of 2nd MAW's ALSS tasking. You want the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing support element lineage for comparison, not the group level, the element. That's where the gap is. Compare the 3rd MAW's support element OPCON tasking from the last 90 days against your current allocation request. The discrepancy will be in the first 2 line items. Aiken was quiet for a moment. That's exactly right. How did you? She had already turned the page. That evening, a plain white envelope had been slid under her BOQ room door. No return address, no sender marking of any kind. Inside, a single folded sheet, a complete printout of every page of the audit file she had been locked out of that morning, forwarded from an internal routing address that she could not trace to a registered user. Someone with authorized reading room access had wanted her to keep working. At the bottom of the final page, in handwriting she did not recognize, 2 words, "Keep going." She read the sheet without changing expression. She folded it back into the envelope, fitted it inside the rear cover of the Rampart binder, and turned off the desk lamp. In the dark, she held the envelope for a moment, not reading it, just holding the outside of it. Then she looked at the door, then the window. Then she set it down on the desk and did not pick it up again. Holloway had spent 32 years developing the capacity to distinguish between people who had been trained and people who were pretending to have been trained. He had served alongside Force Reconnaissance Marines, Marine Raiders, operators from 3 branches of the Joint Force, and 2 Allied SOF formations. He knew what MARSOC tradecraft looked like at rest, in the unrehearsed minutes of a day when no one was watching, or when everyone watching had been assessed and found unlikely to see what was in front of them. He had watched her display it for 15 consecutive days, without appearing to know she was displaying it, which was itself a form of tradecraft, the highest form, the kind that could only be built over years of operational practice. He had also, through a query he had been careful to structure so that it would not flag his own access tier, confirmed that her cover identity was active file, classified at a level that his credentials could not open. That confirmation told him everything he needed to know about what she was. The question he was now running was different. The question was what Thorpe was. More specifically, how much operational danger Thorpe was standing in at this moment, and whether Thorpe had any awareness of it at all. Day 14, 2200 hours. Holloway, at a personal laptop, not the duty machine, a private device he had owned for 11 years, cross-referencing Thorpe's posting history against 3 procurement anomalies he had noted in the installation's logistics reports during his first week at Cherry Point. He had circled them in pencil on a printout he was not supposed to have made, because a MARSOC support coordinator detailed to a Marine air station does not have a formal role in installation procurement oversight, and his access to those reports had been incidental, a wrong turn in the base administration system that had shown him 2 pages before the system corrected and redirected him. He had printed those 2 pages. He had circled 3 line items in pencil. He had folded the printout into the inside cover of his duty notebook and had not looked at it again. That had been 9 days ago. He looked at it now, and the 3 line items were not anomalies. They were nodes. Day 15, 0600 hours. The parking structure 2 blocks off the installation's eastern perimeter. Holloway on his personal phone, calling RB. Retired Colonel Raymond Bruder, 61, former regimental executive officer, Marine Raider Regiment. Holloway's commanding officer across 2 deployments, and the man who had written his last 3 fitness report endorsements, picked up on the first ring. Holloway described what he had observed. Not a name, not an operation, a behavioral profile, the eye discipline, the vocabulary precision, the meal geometry, the 11-second phone call, the way she answered Aiken's logistics question in Moss designator shorthand without appearing to notice she had done so. Bruder listened to all of it without interrupting. A long pause. If she's who you think she is, walk away, Gunny. Don't help her. Don't interfere. Don't warn anyone. Walk away. Holloway asked one more question. Bruder said, "The man she's watching. He's the threat, not her." 1200 hours. The mess. Holloway at the corner table, timing her. 7-minute meal cycle. He had confirmed it across 4 separate meals now. Fork at the 6 o'clock position on the plate rim between every bite. Water glass returned to the same 3-inch square of placemat each time. The variance across all 4 meal observations was under 9 seconds total. He did not write any of this down. A master gunnery sergeant with 32 years of service does not need to write down things he is not going to forget. 1430 hours. The base operations corridor. He passed Thorpe in the hallway outside the flight ops scheduling office. Thorpe was coming out of the procurement suite, moving at a pace slightly faster than the building warranted, a plain folder under his left arm, checking his left shoulder as he turned into the corridor. Holloway clocked the folder, the pace, the shoulder check. He had seen that particular behavioral signature, the energy of someone transporting material they could not afford to be asked about, too many times across too many contexts to misread it. He said nothing. He kept walking. 1700 hours. The chain link perimeter fence above the flight apron. An F. A-18 was taxiing on the runway below. Afterburners low. Routine. Holloway stood with his hands in his pockets. His phone was in his jacket. He had made his calls. He had his answers. He turned and looked back across the installation yard toward the administrative building. Through a ground floor window, Thorpe was visible at his desk, head down, moving papers. Holloway looked at him the way a man looks at something that is already finished, even if it does not know it yet. He had served alongside men who were afraid, and men who were genuinely dangerous. And he had learned across 32 years that the most dangerous thing in any room was never the loudest voice. It was the one that had not spoken yet. Subscribe to Honor Tales. What the watcher just heard on that call is the reason she walked onto this installation in the first place. That night, day 15, late, the flight line noise, a low, continuous hum through the BOQ window glass. This was the only part of the story that lived entirely inside her. No antagonist, no watcher, no installation politics, no performance, just a drawer she opened, and the things inside it, and the full weight of what she had done and what it had cost to earn the right to be in this room running this mission. She opened the bottom desk drawer. A folded photograph in a clear plastic sleeve. A sealed evidence envelope she did not have authorization to open until the Phase 2 closure was filed. A handwritten letter on standard government correspondence paper, dated 8 months ago, in handwriting she recognized as her regimental colonel's. And a challenge coin, Marine Raider Regiment on one side, Eagle Anchor Globe centered, and on the reverse, hand-stamped in slightly uneven letters, REAPER 6. She did not take out the photograph. She did not take out the letter. She took the coin and held it. October 2024, Eastern Africa. The operation brief had been clean. 12-hour window. Bashir Sakr, arms broker, Interpol flagged. The man whose name had appeared in 41 of the 47 pages of the diverted components ledger, isolated in a transit safe house outside a compromised forward compound. The encrypted drive with the full ledger documentation was in the safe house with him. Her MSOT had the compound diagram, the guard rotation, and a clean exfil corridor to the extraction point. It was supposed to take 11 hours and 40 minutes. It went wrong in the last 90 minutes. A secondary coalition element had been repositioned without notifying her team. The repositioning blocked the primary exfil route. The secondary corridor was covered. Staff Sergeant Devin Ortiz went down at the compound wall, first through the breach. Last thing she heard him say was a fire direction call. She was still giving instructions from when she heard him stop. Sergeant Ramon Alvarez at the vehicle, covering their 6 during the repositioning. Corporal Jaron Wells at the wire, 12 meters from the extraction point, close enough that she saw it happen. Allied operator Lieutenant Faisal al-Bishri, Jordanian Special Operations Forces, had Sakr by the collar and was pushing him toward the extraction vehicle when the secondary element's fire shifted. Faisal covered the last 200 meters, got Sakr into the vehicle, and cleared the wire. Faisal made it 40 meters past the wire before she heard the second shot. She kept driving. She had the objective and the package, and she kept driving. And that is the only decision she has never been able to file away cleanly, even now. Even in the BOQ room at Cherry Point with the coin in her hand, the decision to keep the vehicle moving, to deliver Sakr and the ledger, to do the thing she had been sent there to do. 4 people who had been alive when she crossed into that compound were not alive when she reached the extraction point. She had known all 4 of them by their voices in the dark. She drove alone and she did not stop. The Silver Star was presented 8 months later in a room at Stone Bay, with 11 people and no press, and a citation classified at a level that meant it would never appear on any public record. Her commanding colonel read 2 paragraphs from the citation, stopped, looked up, and said simply, "She walked out with the objective and the package. That's what raiders do." 3 of the 11 people in the room had been on the radio during the operation. 2 of them had heard her voice on the net in the last 20 minutes of the exfil, her giving fire direction calls, her calling Ortiz, her voice going flat in the way voices go flat, when there is nothing left to say, and the only available action is to keep moving. They did not look at her during the ceremony the way you look at someone you are congratulating. They looked at her the way you look at someone you are glad is still in the room. She did not cry during the ceremony. She cried once, in the parking lot, alone for 7 minutes. Then she went back inside and filed her Phase 2 operational concept memo, because the ledger had named a captain stationed at a Marine air installation on the eastern seaboard, and there was work to be done. She hadn't named herself. The team had named her REAPER 6. They had stamped the coin before the operation, before any of it, the way teams sometimes do, a unit gesture, a small ritual of belonging. The coin meant something different now than it had the day they made it. She hadn't decided yet what it meant. She held it and did not decide. Back in the present, the BOQ room, the coin in her hand. 15 days at Cherry Point. Phase 2 audit complete. Every document transmitted. Every access flag logged. Every incident in the notation grid. She had everything she came for, documented and transmitted, except the final act. Thorpe needed to take one more step on his own, on record, in a manner that could not be ambiguated or administratively processed away. The trap needed bait. She opened the audit file on her secure device, the real one, not the Rampart binder, and reviewed the procurement schedule for the following morning. One line item, one inventory gap that Thorpe would not be able to leave alone. She put the coin back in the drawer and locked it. She did not look at the photograph. She turned off the light. She stood at the locked drawer for 3 seconds, still, facing it. Then she turned away. She did not look like someone who was grieving. She looked like someone who had already made every decision there was to make, and was now simply waiting for the sequence to run. His procurement audit folder was gone from his desk when he arrived at 05:45 hours on day 15. A base-wide compliance sweep, unannounced, initiated at 0400 by the Inspector General's office, a sweep he had not been informed of in advance, a sweep that had pulled his files and left a receipt that told him nothing useful. He stood in the doorway of his own office and looked at the empty desk, and something moved behind his eyes, a recognition, not yet fully articulate, that something was closing around him. His response was not to stop. It had never been, in his entire career, his instinct to stop. His response was to accelerate. He had the fabricated invoice prepared. He had built it 3 days earlier as a contingency, a duplicate skim document, backdated to appear 30 days old, formatted to match the legitimate invoices in the parts diversion sequence, linking the Clearwater Defense Logistics subaccount to Caldwell's Rampart Performance Group consulting contract number. If she had real evidence, he needed to muddy the water between her and it. If she didn't, he needed her removed before the compliance sweep reached her workspace. Either way, he took the folder from the lower desk drawer and walked down the administrative corridor. The building was empty at that hour. His footsteps carried in the corridor. He was moving at a pace slightly faster than the building warranted, the way a man moves when he is doing something he has spent 3 days talking himself into being certain about, which is a different kind of certainty than the kind that is earned. 18 hours. The conference room that served as her consultant workspace was empty. Her Rampart binder on the table, her consultant kit beside it, her blazer on the back of the chair. He opened the kit, located the assessment form section, and slid the fabricated invoice between the second and third forms. He did not pause to check it. He closed the kit and walked back out. He was back in the corridor in 11 seconds. He did not look at the blazer. He did not see the hairpin at the lapel, matte black housing, lens angled at roughly 14 degrees downward, pointed at the table surface, and specifically at the consultant kit, recording continuously since day 3. The 11-second insertion was captured at full resolution from a distance of 41 centimeters. Every frame of it, the folder under his arm, the kit opening, the invoice sliding between the forms, the kit closing, the door. 06:41 hours. She entered the workspace, sat, opened the binder. She opened the consultant kit. She had inventoried every page of the kit each morning and each evening for 15 days. She could have identified its contents by touch and sequence in a blackout. She found the invoice on the 3rd page. She did not touch it. She swept the door, then the window. Then she photographed the open kit with the invoice in position, undisturbed, precisely where he had placed it. She closed the kit. She picked up her coffee. She looked at the kit on the table. For the first time in 15 days, her expression changed. It was not a dramatic change. Small, and private, and almost amused. the expression of someone watching an opponent make the final move in a game whose outcome has been determined since before the game began. Not triumphant. Tired. Specifically tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and can see the place where they will be allowed to set it down. 07:20 hours. The command brief corridor. Thorpe performing confidence. Squared away, coffee in hand, acknowledging passing officers with the nod of a man who has nothing to be concerned about. He passed her in the corridor on her way into the briefing room. She looked at him. Door, window, door. Threat priority. Then back to him. And the small, private smile was still there. He slowed. Just slightly. Trying to read it. He could not. He told himself she was nervous. He told himself she was nothing. He told himself this was already over. He kept walking. And somewhere in the building a clock he could not hear had reached 0. The morning command brief was underway. 9 officers around the table. Thorpe at his usual position to the right of the presiding officer. Major Aiken, running the MAGTF logistics review. 3 slides in. Caldwell's Rampart binder open on the table in front of the chair she had occupied for 10 days. The fluorescent panel on the east wall still cycling through its slow, unaddressed flicker. The door opened without a knock. Master Gunnery Sergeant Brennan Holloway. Service Charlies. Cover under his arm. The full measure of 32 years of Marine Corps service visible in the way he occupied a doorway. He did not look at Thorpe. He did not look at the room. He looked at her, directly, without preamble, and addressed her with the clarity of a man who has been in the Marine Corps long enough to understand that what he is about to say in this room will be the last sentence in a sequence that began 18 months ago and 7,000 miles from here. Reaper 6, ma'am, you have incoming, 22 minutes. He stepped back. The door closed behind him. The room held its silence. Thorpe looked at Caldwell. She was already closing the Rampart binder. She stood, and the way she stood was different from every way she had stood in any room for 15 days. The geometry of her was different. The consultant was gone. What was standing in the room now was what had been standing there the entire time, and the room could feel it before anyone in it could name it. What is... Thorpe's voice had gone uncertain at the edges. Who is Reaper 6? Nobody answered him. 22 minutes later, the mess hall doors opened. Colonel Dale Forsyth, 48, Commanding Officer, Marine Raider Regiment, formal blues, medals in correct sequence, service ribbons current. Beside him, Sergeant Major Clarence Odom, 54, Regimental Sergeant Major, blues, dress cover, 2 military police personnel at the entry. The room, which now included the 9 briefing officers and 6 others who had moved from adjoining spaces because word travels in a building at the speed of a man walking with purpose, came to reflexive attention. Both senior Marines rendered full formal salutes, not to the room, to her. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms go quiet when something irrevocable is happening. Not the quiet of waiting, but the quiet of understanding. Major Aiken, at the head of the table with the logistics presentation still running on the screen behind him, looked at the 2 senior Marines, looked at Caldwell, and put down the presentation remote. The junior officers around the table held very still. This was the moment when every interaction they had observed over 15 days was reorganizing itself in their understanding. Every time she had answered a logistics question in notation they didn't fully parse, every time she had talked the corpsman through a trauma sequence in cadence they had heard before, but not from consultants, every time she had looked at a door, her eyes swept the room, door, window, door, tactical priority, one complete pass, before she returned the salute. Crisp, correct, held for the appropriate count. And now, everyone in the room saw it. Now, everyone in the room understood exactly what they had been watching for 15 days, and what it meant that they had not recognized it, and what it meant that she had allowed them not to recognize it, and what level of discipline that had required across 15 days of provocation. Sergeant Major Odom unfolded a printed sheet and read from it in the same register he would use to read a maintenance schedule. Major Reese Caldwell, United States Marine Corps, Commanding Officer, Bravo Company, 2nd Marine Raider Battalion, Marine Raider Regiment, call sign, Reaper 6. He paused. Captain Garrison Thorpe, United States Marine Corps. You are named as a person of interest in a federal counterintelligence investigation into procurement fraud and aviation parts diversion, predicated on evidence recovered during a classified operation in Eastern Africa in October of 2024, and supplemented by documentation generated during Phase 2, operational closure at this installation. A sealed quash order is now in effect. Thorpe's face ran the sequence in real time. Confusion first, the salutes directed past him, the words not parsing, the brain refusing the arithmetic of it. Disbelief, his own name in the order, the MPs moving from the entry toward his position, the math still refusing to add correctly. Recognition, 15 days running backward at full speed. The binder, the logistics question he hadn't thought twice about, the hairpin on the blazer he had walked past a dozen times, the small private smile in the corridor. Horror, the understanding, arriving complete and without mitigation, that he had done it himself, with his own hands, in a room where a camera had been running since day 3, and she had waited, and waited, and waited, because she had known since before she arrived that he would reach for exactly the thing that would undo him. The MPs reached him. He did not resist. He was escorted through the mess hall doors, and the doors closed. She watched him cross the room, eyes tracking him the full distance, flat, measuring, final. Then she looked back at the table. She opened the Rampart binder to the last notation page. She wrote one entry in the leftmost column. She set her pen down at the 12 o'clock position on the binder cover. The report was complete. What followed Thorpe's arrest was not clean, because these operations never close cleanly. They close at speed and with collateral noise and with people who knew and said nothing, and people who did not know and cannot reconcile what they are being told, and sometimes, almost always, with one name on the warrant manifest who is already moving before the ink is dry. Over the next 72 hours, the Cherry Point skim cell collapsed in 4 beats. Beat 1. NCIS and the Marine Corps Inspector General's office moved simultaneously on Thorpe's procurement infrastructure. The 47-page parts diversion ledger, recovered from a compromised compound in Eastern Africa 18 months prior, combined with 18 months of Phase 2 documentation, was submitted as primary evidence in a federal fraud proceeding. 11 personnel were flagged across 2 installations, Cherry Point and Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort. Thorpe's access credentials, when entered by investigators, unlocked 6 contractor sub-accounts that had not appeared in any administrative inventory. Each of the 6 had been active for between 8 and 22 months. Beat 2. A NCIS field team and a marine logistics element recovered $4.2 million in diverted aviation components from a commercial warehouse space in a Craven County industrial park, 43 minutes from the installation by vehicle. The components were tagged for F.A. 18 scheduled maintenance, hydraulic actuator assemblies, radar component housings, avionics subframes, and had been rerouted through 3 separate shell invoices before coming to rest in the warehouse. The investigators photographed the pallets in sequence. One photograph set entered the federal case file. A second was forwarded to Caldwell's operational closure report, which she filed from the BOQ room at 17:22 hours. Beat 3. The arrest warrant for Heyman Beck, Chief Executive Officer, Clearwater Defense Logistics, the civilian processing layer who had managed the ledger's financial architecture across 4 years and 2 continents, was signed at 13:40 hours on day 16. His registered office address in Arlington, Virginia. By 15:12 hours, 91 minutes before the warrant team arrived at the building, a Clearwater corporate aircraft had departed from a regional executive airport 40 minutes north of the city. Destination entered on the flight plan. Private. 1 passenger on the manifest. The warrant team photographed an empty desk and a coffee cup still holding residual warmth. Beat 4. First Lieutenant Aaron Briggs, 27, supply officer, walked into the NCIS field office on the installation without being summoned and without an appointment. He had driven there from the administrative building at 08:15 hours on day 16, parked in the visitor lot, sat in his vehicle for 4 minutes, and then gone inside. He submitted a voluntary written statement documenting in full every message in the junior officers group text thread, including the nickname and the badge photo meme, and the specific officers who had contributed each entry. the hand-lettered sign, and who he had seen placing it. 3 separate occasions on which Thorpe had directly pressured junior officers to provide corroborating accounts for the fraternization memorandum, naming the date and location of each conversation, and the screenshot he had taken on day 11 and had not sent anywhere. He also submitted his phone, unlocked, with the screenshot still in his camera roll, time-stamped and unedited. The lead investigator thanked him. Briggs said he should have come in sooner. The investigator said that was for a different conversation. Briggs had not acted when it would have cost him relatively little to act. He acted now, when acting cost him something different, the comfortable standing of a junior officer who had stayed quiet and stayed clean, traded for the record of a man who had eventually done the right thing. It was noted in the case file. It was the kind of thing that tends to get noted. If you stayed all the way to the salute, subscribe. There's another mission queued for tomorrow, and the next operator is already in the room. On the evening of day 17, she drove off the installation through the eastern gate and took the state road 23 minutes south to a public park outside Newbern. A veterans memorial wall, black granite panels, regional, not the national one, names of local service members from 5 conflicts across 60 years. The park was nearly empty at that hour. A jogger on the far path, a man walking a dog along the perimeter fence. She walked to the wall alone. She found the 4 names she was looking for. She stood with her hands at her sides in the cooling early evening air, the flight line noise below audible threshold for the first time in 17 days. She did not speak. She stood there the way you stand when there is nothing to say that the standing doesn't already say better. She took the challenge coin from the inside pocket of her jacket, Marsoc Eagle anchor globe on the front, REAPER 6 stamped on the reverse, and set it at the base of the wall, below the 4th name. 11 names indicted. $4.2 million recovered. 72 hours to close the cell. Those were the numbers that would appear in the federal case summary and the Inspector General report and the MAGTF Command Reorganization memo. The 4 names on the granite panels in front of her were not in any case file. They were in a different kind of accounting, the kind that does not have a case number and does not close. Her secure handset vibrated once. She took it from her jacket pocket and read the message standing at the wall, in the last of the evening light, with the 4 names above the coin she had set down. Reaper is still in the field. Haymon is in Tirana. Below the text, a satellite image, timestamp current within 4 hours. A walled property in the Tirana Basin, southeastern Albania. Pale stone construction, upper story windows facing south. 1 vehicle in the gravel drive, dark-colored, current registration plates visible in the image. 1 light burning in a window on the upper floor. Someone home. Someone who believed he was beyond the reach of the thing closing behind him. 6 words. She read them once. She put the phone in her jacket pocket. She stood at the wall for 10 more seconds, still. Then she turned and walked back to the vehicle. The coin stayed where she had left it, at the base of the wall. She had a flight to book. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.